Welcome to the channel where American history becomes simple, clear, and meaningful. Here, we don't just study dates and events, we learn English through real stories that shaped the United States. In today's episode, we explore emergence of colonial governments along with the French and Indian War. As we move through this story, we'll discover how ordinary people over time slowly began to see themselves in a new way, but as Americans. So listen carefully, learn naturally, and travel back in time with us. Let's begin.
Emergence of colonial government. In the early years of colonial America, one thing stood out clearly. England did not tightly control its colonies. With the exception of Georgia, the colonies began as business ventures or private territories. Some were run by groups of investors, while others were owned by individuals who had received land from the king. By doing this, the English crown gave up direct control over daily life in America. This did not mean the colonists were completely free. For example, the Virginia Company held full governing power over Virginia. Since the company operated from England, settlers had little direct influence at first. Even so, the colonists did not see themselves as subjects ruled from afar. They believed they were building communities much like England itself, self-governing societies with only a loose connection to London. Over time, rule from the outside weakened. The settlers carried with them a long English tradition of fighting for political rights. Virginia's first charter promised that colonists would enjoy the same freedoms as people born in England. This included the protections of the Magna Carta and English common law. In 1618, a major change took place. The Virginia Company allowed free settlers to elect representatives who would help make laws with the governor and council. This idea that people had the right to take part in their own government would shape all future colonies. Later charters followed the same pattern. In Maryland, Pennsylvania, the Carolinas, and New Jersey, laws were to be passed only with the consent of free men. New England went even further. In 1620, aboard the Mayflower, the Pilgrims signed the Mayflower Compact. They agreed to govern themselves and create fair laws for the common good. Although they had no legal permission to do this, no one stopped them. For years, Plymouth governed itself without interference. The Massachusetts Bay Colony developed in a similar way. At first, a small group tried to rule alone, but other settlers demanded a voice. When leaders refused, colonists threatened to leave. Faced with this pressure, the colony allowed elected representatives to take control. Other New England colonies, like Connecticut and Rhode Island, simply declared themselves self-governing and created political systems of their own. Only two colonies lacked early self-government. New York was controlled by the Duke of York, and Georgia was run by trustees. In both cases, colonists demanded representation so strongly that the systems soon changed. During the mid-1600s, England was too busy with civil war to manage its colonies closely. Even after the monarchy returned in 1660, colonial administration remained weak and unorganized. Distance also mattered. An ocean separated England from America, making control slow and difficult. Life on the frontier encouraged independence, and government authority spread slowly inland. Still, self-government was not accepted without resistance. In the 1670s, England tried to tighten control by canceling Massachusetts' charter. Later, King James II created the Dominion of New England and appointed a royal governor, Sir Edwin Andros. He raised taxes, ignored assemblies, and jailed critics. When news arrived that James II had been overthrown in England, Boston erupted. Colonists arrested Andros and restored their old governments. New laws followed. The English Bill of Rights and the Toleration Act limited royal power and protected religious freedom. At the same time, philosopher John Locke argued that government existed by agreement with the people and that citizens had the right to resist injustice.
By the early 1700s, most colonies were under royal rule again, but conditions had changed. Colonial assemblies now knew their rights. They controlled taxes and spending. They could propose laws instead of simply accepting orders. Using these powers, assemblies challenged governors and expanded their own influence. Conflicts became common. Over time, colonists began to see that American interests were different from England's. Through struggle, practice, and resistance, colonial legislatures created their own political traditions. Without writing a constitution, they learned how to govern themselves. And long before independence, the habit of self-government was already firmly rooted in American life.
The French and Indian War. Throughout the 1700s, France and Britain were almost constantly at war. They fought in Europe, in the Caribbean, and across the Atlantic world. Britain won some valuable prizes, especially sugar-producing islands in the Caribbean. But overall, the wars ended without a clear winner. France remained a major power in North America. By 1754, French influence stretched far across the continent. France had strong alliances with many Native American tribes in Canada and around the Great Lakes. It controlled the Mississippi River and built a chain of forts and trading posts. Together, these outposts formed a long, curved empire, running from Quebec in the north all the way to New Orleans in the south. The British colonies were boxed in. They remained crowded along the Atlantic coast, east of the Appalachian Mountains. As long as France controlled the Mississippi Valley, westward expansion was at risk. Tension finally turned into violence in 1754. Near a French fort called Fort Duquesne, where Pittsburgh stands today, British and French forces clashed. Leading the Virginia militia was a 22-year-old officer named George Washington, a young planter and surveyor. It was his first taste of war. Alarmed by the danger, British leaders called for cooperation among the colonies. Representatives from several colonies met in Albany, New York, in the summer of 1754. Their goal was to strengthen ties with the Iroquois and secure their support. But the delegates went further. They argued that the colonies needed to unite to survive. Benjamin Franklin proposed a bold idea known as the Albany Plan of Union. Under this plan, the colonies would form a joint government. A president appointed by the king would lead it, alongside a council chosen by the colonial assemblies. This central body would manage defense, relations with Native Americans, trade, and Western settlement. Most importantly, it would have the power to raise taxes. The plan failed. Neither the colonies nor Britain were willing to give up control. The colonies feared losing their authority over taxes and land. The idea of unity was ahead of its time. Meanwhile, the war continued. Britain's stronger navy, better organization, and effective leadership eventually made the difference. The conflict became known in America as the French and Indian War, and in Europe as the 7 Years' War. In 1763, the Peace of Paris ended. France gave up Canada, the Great Lakes region, and all land east of the Mississippi River. The French dream of a North American empire was finished. Britain now stood alone as the dominant power. But victory brought a new problem. Britain suddenly controlled a massive empire that was difficult and expensive to manage. In North America alone, its territory had more than doubled. The population had changed as well. British rulers now governed French-speaking Catholics in Canada and large Native American populations. Protecting and administering these lands would cost enormous amounts of money. The old colonial system was no longer enough. British leaders believed the empire needed tighter organization and stronger control. But new policies would not be welcomed in the colonies. Many colonists were already suspicious. They began to wonder whether Britain was still defending their freedoms or becoming a threat to them. That doubt would soon change the course of history. Was America an exceptional nation from the very beginning? The United States did not become an independent country until almost 175 years after the first colonies were founded. Yet, long before independence, many Europeans already saw America as different. Some looked at it with hope, others looked with fear. The people who crossed the Atlantic came for many reasons. Some were younger sons of wealthy families with no inheritance. Others were religious outsiders or poor workers bound by contracts. What they shared was a powerful belief that America offered opportunity and freedom that Europe could not. For many settlers, life in America felt like a fresh start. They entered a vast land with few social rules and no old aristocracy. The only societies already there were Native American communities, which the settlers pushed aside as they expanded. Unlike Europe, America had no feudal system to hold people in place. Without noble titles or ancient privileges, society was more open. This made it easier for ideas of political freedom and social equality to grow. These ideas did not appear by accident. They were shaped by thinkers like John Locke, who argued that individuals had natural rights and that government power should be limited. In Europe, such ideas developed slowly and faced strong resistance. Most immigrants came from the British Isles, one of the most politically free regions in Europe at the time. Many followed forms of Calvinist Christianity, which stressed responsibility, moral rules, and agreements between people. These beliefs supported ideas of personal rights, contracts, and social movement. As American cities grew along the coast, commerce expanded and society became more complex. But instead of blocking freedom, these cities helped spread it. In fact, it was in these busy ports and towns that the American Revolution later began. At the same time, the frontier kept moving west. Each new settlement required people to rebuild society again and again. This constant beginning reinforced independence, equality, and self-rule. Europe followed a very different path. There, ideas of democracy advanced slowly and often violently. The French Revolution tried to destroy an old social order while creating freedom and equality. Instead, it led to chaos, fear, dictatorship, and eventually a new empire. In America, the past did not weigh so heavily. The challenges of building a new society on open land encouraged liberal and democratic ideas from the start. Without centuries of rigid tradition, those ideas felt natural. A society that escaped the burdens of European history was bound to see itself as exceptional. And from that belief grew a nation that would come to think of itself as exceptional. The Witches of Salem. In 1692, something strange began to happen in a small place called Salem Village, Massachusetts. A group of teenage girls started to suffer from sudden fits and unexplained behavior. They claimed it began after listening to frightening stories told by an enslaved woman from the Caribbean. Soon, fear turned into accusation. The girls pointed their fingers at several local women and called them witches. The townspeople were shocked, but not entirely surprised. At that time, belief in witchcraft was common across both Europe and colonial America. To many people, the idea that evil forces could harm a community felt very real. Local officials quickly set up a court to investigate. Within weeks, 6 women were found guilty and executed. Instead of calming the situation, the trials made everything worse. The court allowed a dangerous kind of testimony. Witnesses claimed they had seen the spirits of the accused appear in dreams or visions. This so-called spectral evidence could not be proven or questioned, but it was accepted as truth. Fear spread fast. By the fall of 1692, 20 people had been put to death, including several men. More than 100 others were locked in jail.
and 5 died while waiting for trial. Even respected and powerful citizens were no longer safe. When accusations began to spread beyond Salem, religious leaders across the colony stepped in. They warned that the trials had gone too far. The governor agreed and ordered an end to the proceedings. Those still imprisoned were later released or found not guilty. Although the Salem witch trials were a brief episode, they left a deep mark on American history. Most historians now see them as a case of mass hysteria, fueled by fear and a sincere belief in witchcraft. While some of the girls may have exaggerated or pretended, many adults truly believed they were fighting evil. Looking closer, the story reveals something even deeper. Salem was changing. Like much of New England, it was moving from a farming-based, deeply religious society towards a more commercial and secular one. Many of the accusers belonged to the old world of farms and church authority. Many of the accused came from a growing class of shopkeepers and traders. Behind the fear of witches was a quiet struggle for power. That struggle between tradition and change has appeared many times in American history. In Salem, it took a deadly and tragic form, driven by panic and belief that the devil was present in everyday life. The Salem witch trials remain a powerful warning. They show how quickly fear can destroy reason and how dangerous false accusations can be. Even today, when large groups are blamed without evidence, we still call it a witch hunt.